as leaders in a new AI economy, we start with ourselves. We learn the tools and techniques, we develop our capabilities, and we provide ourselves and our team members long-term relevance and integrating the tools that promote clarity, action, and growth.
I'm Ed Marsh. Welcome back to this episode of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. Some days it feels like just nothing makes sense anymore. Reality seems unmoored from what we've accepted to be true. Fundamental assumptions on which people have built businesses are being challenged. Social norms are being disrupted. AI is threatening to completely change how many of us work. It's to call it a period of turmoil is an understatement, but we can't just take a 5-year vacation until the fourth turning, as Neil Howe calls it, is over somewhere in the early 2030s when a new calm and normal reemerges. So we have to make sense of things in order to make our reasonable best judgments in business and in life. And AI, at the same time, amidst all this uncertainty, we've got this promise of AI to help tease insight from just masses of chaotic and seemingly random information. We're seeing AI accelerate discoveries in all sorts of complex fields, from drug discovery to locating mineral deposits to making sense of large volumes of marketing and sales information. And somehow we have to navigate this mess to try to make sense of the chaos. To help with that today, I'm joined by Jeff Tehan, who calls himself a Sensemaking Evangelist. So it certainly sounds like a buzzword. We're going to give him a chance to defend why a buzzword could actually help us make sense. But Jeff has an interesting background that I think really positioned him for this role. He's had a career in product marketing, which requires distilling lots of buyer and market information and details on internal product and process capabilities into some kind of a product roadmap that actually makes sense. So essentially, it's teasing some clarity out of really often incompatible expectations and circumstances. He's also a former Army Blackhawk pilot, a role that obviously requires processing lots of information quickly in high stakes and confusing environments. And he's a natural leader who understands the role of leadership in helping companies and people navigate uncertainty. I've known Jeff since about 2010, and I've watched his evolution as a thinker, particularly the last several years, as he's really heavily invested in thinking about the challenges and opportunities of leading business through an AI transformation. He's a graduate of the MIT X-Pro AI Strategy and Leadership Program, and as I said, he's focused on sense-making, which he defines as the leadership capability that enables people to interpret uncertainty, align teams, and make timely, insight-driven decisions. So hopefully during the next hour of conversation, you're going to find some nuggets that will help you make sense of an incredibly random and complex environment. And when you do, please like the episode, comment on what resonates, and share the episode with people you think may benefit. So thank you for joining me today, Jeff. And I'm hoping by the end of this hour, the world is going to make a lot more sense to me.
Thank you, Ed. It's great to talk to you this morning. You're already throwing me under the bus with the sense-making tag.
Oh, come on now! I think you wear that title proudly, and I'm looking forward to having your insights. I heard once that on day one in Army flight school, they seat you in an auditorium and you listen to a recording of air traffic control with a helicopter pilot trying to fly in the clouds. And then you see a brief video clip as the helicopter emerges from the clouds, basically flying upside down and into the ground. My understanding, I'm not an aviator, my understanding is that the point is that you need to hammer home the point that you have to trust your instruments, because sometimes things are not what they seem. I mean, we've got instincts that may tell us something wrong, and sometimes it may feel like we're flying in the clouds right now, and our primary and backup instruments are giving us contradictory info. Help us overcome, kind of right out of the gate, this sense of business vertigo that we have.
Yeah, a really interesting analogy there, Ed, with the flying in the clouds. Everything you speak of to me sounds or resonates of uncertainty, and we're looking for ways to reduce uncertainty from every employee in the organization all the way to the board at the top. decisions are delayed or deferred or questionable or soft because people are uncertain and they don't want to make that hard determination and affect all, so many things. Reducing uncertainty has been handed to us with AI in so many ways, where we are able to elevate ourselves above the crunching of the numbers and start making sense of what it means and what to do with it. I think this involves a new leadership style, and leadership in the new AI economy, I believe, starts with each individual, starts with the leader himself, reassessing himself or herself, going along tools and techniques like conducting personal SWOT analyses or identifying your skills and weaknesses, and developing not just literacy in your field, but also in AI strategy and ethical awareness. All of these things come up when decisions are delayed or deferred, and the sense maker is able to confidently make the right decision and lead his team accordingly.
So you talk about decisions delayed and deferred, and I keep hearing this stat that 40 to 60% of complex B2B sales end in no decision, just deferred and delayed and abdicated decisions. The other thing is, you're talking about AI. On the one hand, AI feels like it has the promise, and I think you're going to give us examples, and we keep hearing about people who are realizing the promise of using AI to make sense of the tactical stuff around us. At the same time, the very presence of AI and the uncertainty about what it does in the future creates an entirely meta level of uncertainty that in some ways feels like it aggravates everything.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, absolutely. When the decision making is distributed as well, it can help. In other words, the people crunching the data now have the ability to look at that data more effectively across a broader spectrum and make decisions. If the organization has, let's say, refined its leadership and its organizational style to allow for distributed leadership, the decisions are made at the point of need, not floated up the chain. Anytime the decision-making process has to be explained to the next person in the chain to get them on the same page so they have all the information they need, that interpretation is perhaps faulty. The delay in trying to figure out, if a subordinate were talking to their manager, they give it a lot of thought. How am I going to approach this? How do I reach this person? Up and down the leadership chain, human first, human in the loop, human creating the loop are all good strategies for AI adoption. So taking away the uncertainty of why am I using AI? Why am I following this lead and implementing systems that will displace me from my job? Where do I end up? What do I do next? And I think the answer is sense making. Yeah.
All right, so let's back up and understand your background, because my experience is that context of where people come from, how they've navigated their career, the pieces that they put in place, help us to understand their perspective and the way they're seeing things now. So what led you initially to become a warrant officer and a rotary wing pilot?
I started my career in the Army as a radar repairman. I wanted to get into electronics and go to engineering school. Things I did subsequently. I developed my early leadership capabilities in the Army as a young NCO, and I was selected for flight training. At that point, my engineering career was sidelined, and I took that opportunity. One of the biggest senses of value that I brought away from it was the ability to lead. And when you can see the uncertainty in people, and in a military environment, sometimes it's easier to see visible signs of uncertainty. Knowing the right way to go, or even knowing when you don't know, conveys that sense of confidence that your team needs. So extending that through the years, I didn't stick with that. I served proudly in the Army for about 16 years. At the end of it, in the reserve system, I was transitioning back into the business world, and I found the same skills were applicable there. More recently, excuse me, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think your career has kind of built on your work as a radar repairman. Much of it has been about instruments and electronics and diagnostic devices and that kind of thing throughout your career, right?
Yeah, there is clarity there. Always looking for clarity.
Is clarity the inverse of what we have today? Is clarity the outcome of sense making?
Perhaps. I think I look at it a little bit differently. Sense making is a tool that we use. We want to turn uncertainty into knowledge, black into white, however we want to phrase it. But uncertainty, the reduction of uncertainty, ultimately leads to true knowledge. And we all would love to have true knowledge and become enlightened in the future, but in the small business sense, it isn't, I think this is the best way to go. It's the hope that we get to a point where we say, I know this is the best way to go. And that confidence instills confidence in the team.
If we think about scientific method, and I'm going to outdrive my headlights here, but essentially I think of scientific method as a layperson as essentially being the process by which you disprove every other possible hypothesis. Because in most cases, you can't prove that something is right. What you can do is you can show that the others are not right and thereby elucidate what the right answer is. Is that kind of what we're talking about? Or do you believe that we can use these tools to find what is putatively the right answer?
Process of elimination or that type of technique, as you described, is very powerful. And in electronics, in my electronics background, engineering and radar systems, we often do that. Well, we don't know exactly where the problem is, but we know it's not this, and we'll do a test to make sure it's not that. And we'll just eliminate everything, trying to identify the root cause. Oftentimes, in my technical career, we've reached a point through that process where we say, aha, that's what it is. We know that's what it is. There's no more uncertainty.
Right.
That's a wonderful moment. It doesn't happen too often But if we work on reducing that uncertainty, taking the tools that are offered to us, I don't see AI as replacing us. It's giving us the ability to do all the work we've been doing, automating it perhaps, or more than likely, giving us the answers and the confidence that we need to add the human factor, reduce uncertainty, and more importantly, to transfer that confidence and that certainty, that knowledge to the team.
All right. So obviously much of our conversation is going to be about AI, but again, just to help us understand how you got there, you spent a lot of your career in product marketing. How did that become your area of focus?
Actually, Ed, I think it's more product management. Okay. Product marketing, is the way I see it, is one of the functions of product management. Product management, in my eyes, is a internal CEO of a product line. Everything from technical development, product development, go-to-market strategies, finance. All of the teams have to be quarterbacked, and that's how I see a product manager being effective. I was lucky enough to go through an acquisition years ago. We were acquired by a larger corporation, and our new boss told me that they didn't have a role for me in the new organization. Stepped me back a moment, and he said, "But we know you're a product manager." And I asked him to explain what that meant. So that was that was in the late 1990s. All of my diverse roles since then, I have treated as a function of product management, from sales and marketing to technical roles, operational roles, and others. I see it as finding the value proposition and aligning all the resources needed to make that happen, and align those objectives with the corporate goals, the organizational goals. And now the real crux of the question, Ed, a couple of years ago, I was looking at my future with I'm proud of my background in product management and all kinds of different flavors. And I realized how easy it was going to be a product manager in the future with AI at your fingertips. I'm being a little bit facetious, but I truly saw over the course of a couple of months developing my future path that product management probably wasn't the stepping stone that it used to be to organizational leadership at the top. Many of today's top CEOs come from computer science. A couple of years ago, when I was an early product manager, the path to the top was through product management, and perhaps previous to that, it was from R&D. So when I looked at that and I realized my conundrum, I started looking for answers, and one of the things I've always tried to be is a lifetime learner. I looked for programs that would help me make sense of all of this, and the program you mentioned earlier, the MIT AI and Strategy and Leadership program, fit my needs exactly and helped me see how I could expand it beyond my personal path, but to help others. And I was very lucky simultaneously to have a group of people that I worked with that were eager and talented and ready to do this all with me.
So you saw product management as being something that is potentially impacted by AI. What other roles that, common kind of business roles we'd be familiar with, do you think are perhaps facing the greatest jeopardy of disruption by AI?
Well, I don't have a deep insight into many facets of organizations, but I have been involved recently in sales cycles and configure price quote CPQ processes, and I can see a lot of redundancies there where the customer is served better and more quickly and more accurately with the use of AI tools than teams of talented people have been able to do in the past. A lot of that, in my experience, in my direct experience recently, is a disparate group of people trying to make the same decision and not quite tied into the same loop. I had one example where several people on the sales side of a technical organization were trying to sell me the same thing, but they weren't talking to each other.
If only that was an isolated situation.
Right. And AI would have let's call it educated the very first person in that chain what my background is, what do I want, how can they serve me better to get what they want, which is the sale.
Right.
So that doesn't mean those people will be out of a job. I do believe it's true that some people who don't choose to adopt or adapt or rise up and become sense makers, they could find themselves out of a job over time. But the people who really want to make sense of all of this will take the opportunity to use these tools to improve the efficiency of their jobs and help them communicate, help them achieve their goals.
You talk about explainable AI. What do you mean by that?
Explainable AI is a very critical concept to me. When we introduce AI to a team and we say, okay, we have found the thing that will solve your problems, so you have to learn this and then start giving it your data. What I found in going through a AI implementation process not too long ago was sitting down with each individual and explaining to them what tools we were using, how they were used, what their personal data, like what personal data of theirs might be used, where it would live, could they have access to it, just explaining it all to them. And ultimately, what that translates into is a comfort and an ease that they know what the tools are. And I'm not just talking down the organizational chain. I'm talking up to, as I said before, up to the boardroom. Mm-hmm. These are the tools we're using. This is what it does. This is your input to it, and this is what decisions will be. They will facilitate. By doing that, it helps people. It helps in my experience. It helps people take the next step and say, okay, so I'm going to try to use that type of tool over here and tackle this other challenge. It was a difference in a couple of experiences I had between the organization accepting AI adoption and an organization embracing AI adoption.
There have to be situations when embracing AI leads to questionable outcomes that then make people wonder. I mean, there's a lot. I'm in the National Association of Corporate Directors, Private Directors Association. There's a lot of discussion in both those groups about adding an AI director, a non-voting director, to a virtual chair around the boardroom table. There's these stories about problems that have arisen when people basically hand over their agency to AI. How do you avoid having that kind of a problem that blows up that then makes everyone gun shy about adopting AI?
One of the things is AI and data governance. If you establish in-house what types of data are available, what types will be used, who owns the data, where is it going? Federated AI, for example, is a concept that says, let's do the AI where the data exists. Let's not export the data to where the compute is. Everybody has to be aware of hallucinations. All of these LLMs can hallucinate, and they do. And if we put mechanisms in place to validate output, we can mitigate some of those risks. One of them is human in the loop. I'm a big believer in human in the loop, not just the final decision maker, but knowing how it's all working and what that outcome should be. There's also such an ability, such a resource, so many resources available to us to take your final output from your research, an LLM, whatever it is, and put it into another. ChatGPT and Perplexity, or Gemini 2.5, any of the models that would work, just validate the final output. I started along this track duplicating my research. So I would do my research in one or two tools, and then I would duplicate the research in another one or two tools and compare the differences. I found that to be redundant and inefficient, so now I just create the research in the tools of my choice, and then I find the validation tool.
When you were doing it redundantly, you found that the results were essentially the same?
Yes. So finding efficiencies in my process is very analogous to finding efficiencies in daily workflows and processes. I'm doing this twice. I really don't need to. It doesn't mean that you trust AI or you trust the models. It means that, trust but verify, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I can read interesting things on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I don't necessarily take them to the bank. I mean, it may be thought-provoking. It may make me say, okay, I want to go dig into this a little bit deeper somewhere else. I don't necessarily trust all the information I get. There's this hashtag that's been developed around sense-making. So obviously, I mean, I called it a buzzword, and I think a lot of things are buzzwords, but it doesn't mean that they're not necessarily an important and meaningful trend. Are we going to see more of this hashtag sense making? Is this something that you think is gathering momentum?
I first heard the term sense making at MIT. When I first heard it, I have to admit I thought, oh, another buzzword. But as I started exploring it, I realized it really was the answer to a lot of my questions. What will I be doing after this? Oh, sense making. What can my people do after I take away their time-consuming work? Well, there'll be sense making. I've seen it with buyers. I've seen it with technical people, where now they can. In many cases, they said, "Aha! Now I finally have time to do that thing I always wanted to do. I want to compare all of the data across all these jobs." So sense making itself as a buzzword, okay, I'll take it. But I think it's really just a really good word to describe what we're elevating ourselves to.
We touched earlier on the fact that while AI can offer clarity because of its ability to help make sense of a lot of enormous amounts of random data and circumstances, at the same time, the evolution of AI and the uncertainty about how it's going to impact each of us and our companies and the economy creates this meta level uncertainty. And it feels like we're bouncing back and forth between strategic questions about AI and tactical questions of how to apply it. From a leadership perspective, you have to reassure people on the former, and you have to coach and train people on the latter. How does a leader navigate the fact that AI has these two sides to it?
I think in following your question, it sounds like I'm right in the middle of it. I have the senior organizational members looking for one set of answers, and I have the operators, so to speak, looking for other sets of answers. In some cases, I am, and that's okay with me. But my approach is the same with both of them, both groups of people. And maybe it's best said the way that I've taught my models. When I write, I would like it in technical benefit orientation. Excuse me, technical benefit orientation. When I approach somebody, whether a senior manager or a technician or a buyer, I think, how will this benefit them? Not how do I convince them, but how do I find the benefit that appeals to them? Let them find it, perhaps. And the same thing with senior leadership. They might want to know, how much does it cost? That might be their only question, the biggest uncertainty. How much is this going to cost me? Well, you can, if you understand that's their priority, that's their motivation, then you can address that first.
There's been this oscillation of predictions that, on the one hand, AI is going to enhance top performers and make the less capable performers look irrelevant. On the one hand, on the other hand, the AI is a massive equalizer because the delta that it offers for top performers is relatively small, but it will help bottom performers or underperformers very quickly make up the gap. Is this going to take excellence to a new level, or is it going to equalize everyone?
I've not heard it asked that way, Ed. Very insightful question. I do not believe that the underperformers will equalize. I do not believe, and I have examples, personal examples, where the tools were offered, the recipient saw the value and chose not to continue with it.
I'm sorry for laughing, but I mean,
it is laughable in some ways, but there are some people who are, enamored or inured in their ways, and they say, I've been doing this for so long, or maybe not even long, but I know what I'm doing and I don't need to do it differently. And the example, well, what about what we just did? Wasn't that great? Yep. So the top performers will see this and think, wow, if I could do all of this legwork so quickly and get exactly the insight and be able to communicate to every customer with the empathetic voice. I remember in the old days, salespeople would often say, well, this customer has a birthday coming up, or I got to make sure that, say, happy birthday to his wife, or, things like that. That's fine and well. But if you actually knew what that person on an individual basis needed to be successful and needed from you, how would we do that? Well, one tool that I use is taking email chains and putting them into one of my learning models or one of my chatbots. Say, what do you think of this? And it gives me insight that I might not have uncovered on my own, or at least not uncovered without giving it a lot more thought.
Right.
And the insight it gives me might be something along the lines of, oh, I see, this person isn't just worried about making quota. He's thinking about the end of the year, or whatever it might be. Addressing it directly, empathetically, not as a manipulation tool,
Sure.
but as a tool of empathy, has much more success, in my example. So I think that the top performers will take these tools, use it to manage all their work, and find new ways to add value, both to their customers and to the organization. And some people will be left behind over time.
Will AI buying agents transact deals with AI sales agents and completely exclude humans in the B2B sales world?
Who knows what the future will bring? Everything is moving so quickly, but I truly believe that the human in the loop is a key factor going forward. Artificial intelligence, is it artificial? Well, it's non-biological, but humans made it, and it's helped humans to think differently, just like so many evolutions in the past have done.
We've talked a lot about individuals that will thrive or struggle in an AI environment. How about at the corporate level? Are there attributes of companies that will be most benefited by this versus least, for instance, by the kind of industry they're in or the type of work that they have to do? Obviously, the aptitude and the openness of management to incorporate it is a factor, but how about business models themselves?
Well, one of the things that intrigued me was the thought of gauging an organization's appetite for AI.
Okay.
And that kind of aligns with where are the organizational objectives. AI strategy and implementation in an organization will not succeed without alignment with organizational objectives.
Sure.
I kind of lost track there, Ed.
Well, so what kinds of industries or corporate cultures or even corporate strategy objectives will be most where will AI be most advantageous versus not offer such an advantage?
It's a tough question. I can share some advantages right off the bat. In business planning, strategic business planning, all of those components of the business plan, the market research, how deep do you want to do the market research? I'm a big fan of some tools like Porter's 5 Forces analyses and industry rivalry, SWOT analyses. Those things are at our fingertips now. So developing a business plan, which, by the way, I used to make a living writing business plans for people. I'll say that my business plans, while I'm proud of the work I've done in the past, never significantly changed the company the way that I had hoped that they would. And I came to know, even before AI came into my career, so to speak, I knew it wasn't necessarily the value of the business plan. It was the fact that it wasn't owned and developed by the corporation, by the organization itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like somebody walking in or New York Times bestseller says, this is the way to do it now. It doesn't always translate. What AI allows us to do to parcel out all of those things, let's say in a leadership committee, we have the marketing person and the sales person and the technical person and the operational person. Quarterbacking all of that is so much easier, and then bringing back results without uncertainty, more confidence in what they bring back, and collating that all together will be, in my opinion, a better way of doing business planning and strategic planning in the future. It doesn't obviate the need for it. It just makes it so more powerful and more efficient.
Your example triggered the thought. It made me think of I think it's Eisenhower's quote about the value of the plan is minimal. The value of the planning process is enormous. Something like that. I wonder if we're able to write a cold prompt and turn the planning process over to AI, whether we have elegant output but less value because we're not participating in that hard work of the planning process.
I don't quite see it that way, Ed. Again, human in the loop being a driving factor here. AI will give you the output that it will respond to your prompts and give you the output sometimes that you want versus versus cold reality. So there's data bias. You have to make sure that you're being objective about your questions and putting that together. I'm sure there will be a software package, if there isn't one available now, that will say, input 5 lines of information, we'll give you a business plan. But it's really it's not that AI is doing the planning for you. It's doing the research underlying the planning and providing the certainty of each of those components so that the humans can create the business plan. They're just using tools available to them.
So I think I'm coming to understand this term sensemaking as you're using it. And that's essentially that we're not necessarily asking for AI to give us the answer. We're asking for AI to give us a good distillation of all of the relevant information that we need in order to come up with the best answer. Is that fair?
I think that's a good way to put it, Ed. And you can also always, refine. I say you can always refine. You have to always refine your prompts and refine the output. Not to get the end answer that you envisioned in the beginning, because hopefully it's much better than you envisioned in the beginning. But to add that human element, if you're talking about a marketing campaign and you have insight that isn't in black and white, that human factor and that human in the loop helps make that truly your own. It's somewhat analogous to personally developing a communication style in a ChatGPT or a GPT environment where you tell it, no, that's not my voice. I don't like to use M dashes. That's a funny thing in the circles now. But you refine it, and ultimately it doesn't sound like AI because it isn't AI. It's your voice, perhaps and hopefully improved with AI.
There's a lot of fascinating stories right now in the marketing and sales tech software space where you've got, I guess the term is AI native platforms that are achieving enormous scale with just literally tens of people. They don't need armies of coders. And kind of product-led growth model means they don't need a massive sales team. On the other hand, a lot of legacy companies are scrambling to try to incorporate AI agents and incrementally make their product more AI driven. Are legacy software companies doomed?
Well, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, I believe it was in January, stood on stage and announced that the application layer was dead. That must have been a tough message to hear if you're a Microsoft shareholder, because the application layer is where Microsoft Office lives. He went on to explain how, walk through an example where he could create this series of presentations using Word for drafting and Excel for number crunching and PowerPoint. And then he threw up his hands and said, I could just tell the AI to do it now. So, yeah, there are industries that will go away. Another interesting thing I heard about 2 years ago, the buzz on the street was prompt engineering is a good way to go. Prompt engineering is a good field to study. Personally, my thinking at the time was AI doesn't need prompts. I started using AI in some small part because I didn't want to learn another language. I have Python and C++. I didn't want to learn another one, and I didn't have to. It's the same thing with prompt engineering. Knowing how to, the more specific you get, the more biased your question is. And data bias being a big contributor to AI hallucination.
One of the things that I've experienced myself is that I incorporate AI into my standard workflow, kind of for specific tasks. So I can do some things better, faster research, for instance. But my basic workflow remains very similar. Am I changing too slowly? Am I a dinosaur? Am I doomed? Is this the way it's appropriate to gradually integrate it? Give me a sense about that.
I think we're right on the cusp, Ed, of agentic AI in our daily lives, where you might find new workflows. I'm very impressed with what I've seen of your work and your communication style and your podcast. I know that there's a workflow behind it. There's a lot more work than people realize behind what you do.
That's true.
And I think agency will help you refine that workflow. So you're not just using new tools in the same buckets, but, kind of softening the lines between the buckets. One thing that I thought was interesting for me personally, I got a new phone recently. Just like I've done many times before, I scanned a magazine article and I spoke to Gemini 2.5 and I said, distill the text and put it in Google Keep Notes for me and send an email to my personal account. And it said, okay, and it did it. I thought that was a breakthrough for me. In fact, so much so I went back to ChatGPT and told it to update my personal AI adoption timeline to refer to the first time I used agentic AI on a personal level without meaning to, without prior intent.
And so what you mean by that is basically not having to build a workflow with steps. You just say, here's where we are, here's what I want you to get done, here's what I want in the end. And it figures out how to do each of those along the way.
Yes. I want this output.
Right.
And it will figure out what tools it needs to use along the way. And the human in the loop is where you can say, okay, at this point, I want you to stop and explain it to me or get my edit or, whatever. So you become the editor, perhaps, in a way.
Thinking about industrial sales and marketing, it feels like there are definitely inflection points where people need to make sense of something. And if we follow the buying journey, if we're marketing and selling, our company needs to understand buyers better in a world where decision makers and leaders are overwhelmed, where there's committees making buying decisions, they're making errors diagnosing themselves, they're considering many options beyond what we think of to solve their problem. They make or don't make decisions by default in many cases. And so we need to somehow make sense of buyers' worlds that we have only a very limited, narrow view of. How will AI help us make sense of the buyer's world?
I think that AI offers an opportunity to reimagine that model. And starting at the salesperson with a quota, helping him or her switch from a pitch focus to an insight focus. I mentioned it briefly earlier. When you reach out to a customer, if you reach out to 20 customers with the same pitch and you get one response, or you reached out to 20 customers with 20 pitches and got 12 responses, which one would make more sense? Which one would you train yourself to go after? What else? What other insight could you learn from that? Well, the ones that didn't respond fall into a certain category. So I'm making sense of why they didn't do it. I'm making sense of why certain customers responded and why certain customers didn't. It's not a lengthy process. It's not another research project. It's just data that's presented to you. And then you take action on those. If the salesperson is asking better questions that make better sense to the customer or the buyer, they'll get better responses and they'll co-create solutions with their customers. One example might be something along the lines of the salesperson is viewing the history with this customer while they're talking to the customer on the phone and say, oh, I see you have some competitors' equipment as well. Would you like us to manage that for you? Oh, how'd they find that information? Perhaps it's irrelevant, but it's business intelligence. They got that through conversations they've had before with this person. So now they have a new solution with the customer that took away two problems. One, the customer was interested in buying something new. 2, they were looking for someone to manage what they already had. So that insight helps drive the opportunity.
I had a conversation recently with Roy Carmel, who is actually a military vet as well. He started a company that is creating AI sales agents that plug into CRM, particularly focused on deal qualification, where you've got these long sales cycle, big ticket, high consideration, complex, large buying team sort of enterprise sales decisions, trying to consistently qualify those deals. If there's 10 people on the buying team and competing priorities and all kinds of other things, it's really hard, even for a very skilled consultative sales person to manage that. And so they're using these sales agents to identify gaps, whatever your qualification framework is, medic or medpic or even BANT or whatever the case may be. They'll identify the gaps and then almost facilitate the sales coaching by saying, it looks like we need this information. Let's role play how to ask it, or let's war game what the best way is to reach out to that person without annoying the others on the buying team and getting this information. So that feels like a very concrete application of what's getting close to kind of a agentic AI to help with the sales process.
I think that's a great application. When we think about transactional sales, I think the AI benefit is more clear. Configure, price, quote process might be pretty quick. We know what's in inventory. We know how to steer the customer to the right selection.
Right.
But the long sales cycles, which you and I have been involved with for a long time, are more challenging. And what I think is a key factor in improving that performance is the ability to communicate better with the customer. So if we think of that long sales cycle as a chess game,
right?
There's a move on each side. It's your move. Well, if your move is to respond to the customer by an email with a certain message that was unclear or didn't help the customer reduce their uncertainty, well, you might have misplayed that move. If you and the team strategize the move and use all the structured and unstructured data that's available, conversations and email chains and actual facts and figures and past purchases and all that stuff. Because in the end, what you're trying to do is reduce the customer's uncertainty so that they order the product. Not every customer is in the same position in terms of what they need to hear. So AI elevating it or applying it to a long tail sales cycle like this can make every move the best we can do. The best communication, the best outreach, the best empathy to get the best outcome from the customer.
When we think about marketing, one of the things that we need to try to do is anticipate how messaging is going to resonate or not. And one interesting application that I've experimented with a little bit is to create custom GPTs as personas based on a lot of very rigorous qualitative and to some degree quantitative research, first-party interviews, a lot of that kind of information from buyers about how they make decisions, how they do research, the problems they're trying to solve, the concerns they have, the hurdles they think they have to overcome, all of that kind of thing. Pack that into a custom GPT and then use that as essentially an avatar for the buyer and say, okay, we're thinking about a marketing campaign that says this or does this or includes these steps. How do you react to it? That's another interesting way to try to get some, to use it to help, I guess, make sense making in that case of how buyers would react. Have you experimented with something like that?
Absolutely. The buyer persona and the technical, the technical buyer, financial buyer, all of those personas have always been a mainstay of good product marketing. I think the refinement of those personae with AI is something that we didn't necessarily have available to us. In other words, as you described, we build a persona, but then we say, today, persona, your name is Joe, and you work in, Santa Rosa, California, and this is this is the situation. So you can tailor or iterate that persona for each actual human that you're interacting with.
Right.
And it could be 5 minutes before a call. It doesn't have to be lengthy research projects. So I think the idea that you explained, the way you explained it, is very powerful, and it's easy to adapt and iterate.
In a lot of cases, these high consideration, big ticket deals are, there's a relatively small number of transactions. A middle market company, say $100 million company that's selling $1 million solutions, maybe they have 500 deals a year that they're working on. How do we make sure that there's enough data that the conclusions are meaningful and that we're actually operating on under kind of discovering causation as opposed to correlation?
I don't have a good answer there, Ed.
I guess kind of related to that is a question about, you mentioned unstructured data. What if some of the data that we have is actually the absence of data? So in other words, if across that entire constellation of interactions that members of the buyer's buying team had with our company, what if one of them consistently doesn't open emails, or opens emails but doesn't click the links, or clicks the link and only looks at the first page and never looks at the other 10 pages? Are you using those signals as part of the unstructured data as well, or are we really limited to just looking at the things that what's the right way to say it? So the direct signals as opposed to the absence of signals.
Yeah, interesting question. There's a point of, in my opinion, there's a point of diminishing return in collecting data.
Okay.
Structured, unstructured, whatever. We have reams and reams and reams of data. At some point, it doesn't help. And knowing the finite details of persona, A3 versus A2, and that person doesn't click through until the third time. Those types of metrics, I believe they've had their place and they've been powerful in the absence of something more effective. AI being more effective. I think I can give answers quicker that can be validated by us, that don't require us to go down the rabbit hole and find out how many times he clicked that third email.
Right. So we've spent a lot of time talking about how our marketing and sales team can make sense of buyers. Ultimately, I think one of the first couple things you said was about helping the buyers. So the other way to look at this is how we can adopt sense-making as part of our effort to help buyers make sense of their situation. In a way, we need to be genuine. We need to not be manipulative, as you said. We need to help them get to the right conclusion. But if we honestly believe the right conclusion is to do business with us, then that's where we want to help them understand how to get there. So how do we adopt all this? We've talked about our own internal tools and environments. How do we use these approaches to help them make sense of it, even if they haven't incorporated AI into what they're doing?
I really like that question, Ed. In leadership in the new AI economy, one of the things that I like to consider is internal and external influence. So we can analyze data. I have examples where we analyze data from a supplier and made sense of what was going on. There were multiple channels of communication, multiple projects in play, and we were able to understand what was going on with that vendor. And we really wanted that vendor's help. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how to help that customer. excuse me, that supplier. My challenge was I did not have anything positive to tell him or tell that supplier about their process and all the people that were involved with the scenario. Is the burden on me to help that supplier understand their shortcomings and deficiencies? Yes, it does, in my opinion, because ultimately I wanted them as a supplier, but they were falling short. And the sense making that we were able to do internally showed us what their shortcomings were in logical, understandable, and irrefutable ways. So reaching back out to that supplier and explaining to them where they fell short. In that case, we did not suggest what they do. We just told them how it impacted their customer.
Did you find they were receptive?
The jury's still out on that one.
Got it.
All I know is that the intention was good.
So, as one of the keys of leadership in an AI era that you talk about is being people first and tech second. I think you've kind of danced around it a little bit, but hit me between the eyes. What exactly does that mean? How do we implement that?
AI is not replacing us. It's allowing us to have access to more information, reduce uncertainty. I'm sorry, could you ask that again, Ed?
When you talk about the key to leadership in an AI era being people first and tech second.
Thank you. People first, human in the loop, and those types of concepts are required. We're not developing robots to do humans' jobs. Humans, you and I, and everybody listening, we have the ability to upskill, and I don't like using that term per se, but allow us to upskill ourselves. I'm sorry, Ed, I'm going off track again.
That's okay. How about some practical steps to help us train and support field sales teams?
Field sales teams, again, if you talk about a person carrying a catalog, they don't know everything in the catalog. They could get technical understanding and insight and upskill themselves in knowing the product. But ultimately, what they really need to know is the customer. So how can AI help a salesperson understand their customer? If we're talking key accounts and a big corporate account, certainly AI can analyze past or historical data from the salesperson's predecessors and the history with the company very quickly, and allow them to go into that first opening meeting with their new account,
Sure,
for example, with much more insight than they would have had before. I'm not the new guy, that needs to catch up with the last guy left off.
Right.
I've got some new things for you, and turn that into excitement for the customer. Oh yeah, this makes sense. I like the fresh take on all of this.
So you talked about co-creating value, that the salesperson's responsibility is to co-create value. You think that's the key in the AI world. I would kind of argue that's what great salespeople have always done. Is this just kind of the latest tech twist on best practice, or when you talk about co-creating value, do you see it in some sort of a broader sort of a context?
Yeah, co-creating value in my vision is understanding the customer. And you're right; these things are historical. As the words are coming out of my mouth, I think of Peter Drucker from the old days with some great sales advice. Co-creating value is understanding the customer and his needs and helping provide the solution. Sometimes it might take finding complementary offerings to the customer that aren't in your catalog. collaborating with industry partners, occasionally even industry competitors. If you have a shared vision and a shared goal, maybe there are times when you can team up. So this co-creation kind of feeds back to that internal external influence thing as well, where how can you pull together all the pieces of this ecosystem? And I think that AI might give us the ability to do that much better than we've ever been able to do before. So co-creation, the customer is talking to you because they want A, and what they're offered is A plus B plus C. And it makes sense to everybody.
Right. So on the one hand, we're talking about being whipsawed by this, super fast, frantically changing sort of environment. And so leaders and businesses need to be agile and embrace change. At the same time, sometimes it's just an aberration. And so we also need to be able to stick to the things that we know are fundamental and will endure. How do we try to navigate that when the change is coming so fast and these the waves are so extreme?
I mentioned this earlier. I think all of us have to stay out in front to some degree. It doesn't mean you have to be a technical wizard or go back to school, although lifetime learning is great. But understanding yourself and where to fill in the gaps, doing your personal gap assessment, developing not just the technical literacy, but also, and not only the technical ability to use AI, but the strategic and ethical considerations behind it. Because as a leader, those are the questions you'll be asked as well. So if you stay out in front of it, you don't have to be the expert, but these things are available. Find the tools that resonate with you and help your work. So this isn't groundbreaking, but don't jump on the bandwagon just because there's a new tool in town.
Right.
Stick with what makes your job and your workflows more efficient, which help the tools that help you lead your teams better.
Do we need to explicitly train young leaders in sense-making, or is this something that we just model for them and help them learn through observation?
Great question. I don't know if there'll be a certificate program in sense making, but you were an Army officer as well. There are people that rise to the challenge, and it's innate. We're improving, or we're enhancing their capabilities and seeing it shine in them. Those are the people we foster, and the people that don't choose to step up in that way, whether it's in the military or business, they deserve consideration and empathy, and we can find the places where they fit best. But the true leaders of the future will be adopting these techniques, these concepts, and improving all of the aspects of their careers.
You work primarily from the office, traditional office with colleagues around. There's this kind of ongoing conversation about work from home versus work from office, return to office, and a lot of companies seem to be finding that there's value in having people in the office collaborating together. How is AI going to impact that collaboration? Will it make in-person work more or less important?
Well, as somebody who is a big believer in human first, and I've always been a hands-on type of person and type of leader, I think that there is a strength in community, even at work. I think there's a common shared value notion that cannot be replicated with AI. I think logistically, it might make sense that there's some flexibility there. And in some careers, in some organizations, you obviously have to be there in person. But for those that don't, my current role, I think I could probably do at least 50% from home. and I choose not to because I want to be there with the people who are facing the same challenges as me and help lead them through those challenges.
You recently started writing a LinkedIn newsletter on a lot of these topics. I'll put the link to that in the show notes. What other resources do you recommend for executives who want to better understand how to navigate the AI changes and the related leadership requirements?
Well, I mentioned a few times, Ed, that I believe in lifelong learning. For myself personally, I was really getting the impression through a few months of research that I had to start building AI products and services. And I was leaning in that direction until I saw, because I continue to pay attention and I subscribe to a few newsletters, and I saw that there was a different path that was more applicable to me. And I took that opportunity, and it was perfect timing. And I would encourage people to see what's out there. AI fluency, at least understanding all the terminology and certainly at least the rudimentaries about data privacy and security. What data can you use in the open cloud LMs, and which data do we need to keep in-house? Those are critical for all leaders. So if you really fall behind in those, you can take some training, take a class. If you're up to speed on all of it, but there are certain areas that specialization would make sense, go after that. And it's also leadership by example. When your subordinates and your team start seeing you as a senior leader investing your time, you'll do the same.
Sure. How do folks connect with you?
Ed, I really don't have any other way than LinkedIn. My personal email. But
okay, all right. So I'll put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, and that's your preferred way if people are intrigued by these insights and they want to connect with you.
I would like.
Are you doing consulting with companies right now that are trying to navigate these changes?
I have explored. This will be outside the line of conversation here, Ed. I've been exploring some advisory role opportunities, which include, it's due diligence on both sides. I'm not quite ready with the current situation to dedicate more than a few hours a week to looking into different opportunities.
Got it. Okay. All right. So put a bow on this topic for us. How do leaders, how do marketers, how do salespeople adopt sense-making in their everyday work?
And I think throughout our discussion today, I try to emphasize that as leaders in a new AI economy, we start with ourselves. We learn the tools and techniques, we develop our capabilities, and we provide ourselves and our team members long-term relevance, and integrating the tools that promote clarity, action, and growth, not just because they're the new thing or the next best model, but actually how they create value for you and your team.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for taking time and sharing your insights, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Ed. I appreciate your time.
And everyone listening and watching, please hit the bell, drop a comment, shoot this episode to a colleague, and be sure to subscribe to the Industrial Growth Institute podcast.